What's up, Bears fans? Welcome back to another edition of the Willis Twin Towers podcast. I am your host, Jeff Willis. To my right, actually, you're to my left here, aren't you? God, I'm getting confused because it's over here. But anyways, my co-host over here, Tim. I'll introduce him in just a second, let him get going. But before we start here, guys, just a quick reminder, as always, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, give us all a follow on X or Twitter. You can follow our executive producer, Aldo Gandia. He is at Barroom Network. He is the podfather, and he's the one who helps us provide all this content on this channel for you. You can find me at _Jeff Willis. You can find my co-host over here, Tim, at Tim Willis 24. So without further ado, let me switch it over to Tim. And Tim, why don't you give everybody an idea of what we're going to be talking about tonight?
So certainly a lot of Bear stuff to talk about. Some situations around Chicago sports media that I want to mention just for a minute here in a little bit. But to start, most of you are dealing with March Madness right now, watching a lot of college basketball, but Jeff and I are more focused on March Madness right now, which is the only NCAA tournament that truly matters, and that is the NCAA Division I Wrestling Championships that are going on this weekend. Started yesterday, and it goes on for the next 2 days. Just an absolute meat grinder of a tournament, and the best of the best show up. It's amazing and fun to watch. Countless hours for us watching it. My wife, I'm sure, is already getting annoyed with me from watching it, but I live for this stuff. So wanted to bring that up. That's why I'm wearing my college wrestling shirt from where I attended college for, the whole semester that I was there wrestling. But in any case, I wanted to bring back my college days, and it's an experience I'll never forget, for better or for worse. And I love watching it this weekend. If you guys want to get an idea of some of the traits that you want to look for some football players, go watch some of that. I promise you, it's entertaining. Especially the heavyweights. They're super and uber athletic. Matter of fact, Gable Steveson, who's ranked number one, he's already a 3-time national champion. He actually tried out for Buffalo as a defensive tackle in the offseason. So earlier last offseason. And actually, I think he made it pretty far. He didn't make the roster, but he was actually one of them that did that. So pretty exciting stuff. But Jeff, I just want to take a few minutes with this because I don't really have too much that I want to talk about with it, because it's not really a story I really am interested or invested in. But if you guys have not heard, Dan Bernstein was let go from 670 The Score just a matter of hours ago. There was an incident on Twitter where he had caught a fish, and someone basically accused him of killing the fish, even though he claimed that he had caught and released it, and it turned into this spat back and forth, and Dan basically threatened his family and his children. So, regardless of where you stand politically or anything else, there's never a time where you should ever go to those means where you have to threaten someone else's family over a stupid Twitter post and a stupid Twitter comment. Who cares? Who cares what somebody else thinks behind a keyboard? That's my whole thing. Like, to allow somebody to trigger you that strongly that you're going to threaten their family, whether he meant it or not, he certainly did it. And it's just stupid. It's just stupid. It's too bad, considering, the guy worked for the network forever. He's one of the premier voices in sports radio. He's one of the OGs, so to speak. It's just too bad that he would allow somebody on a keyboard to take him to that level where he's going to make comments like that. And, regardless of what anybody thinks, there's a few people, not very many, but there's a few people who are defending him, or at least defending. They're against 670 firing him. They did not like the decision to do that. But in my opinion, that was the only decision to make. You got to let him go. It just shows that you're not going to stand for something like this. It's inexcusable, not necessary. And it's not, at the end of the day, the people that you hire and work for you or what people see when they think about your company. That's the image that you're giving off. So if that's the case, if this is the guy, these are the things that he's talking about and how he is acting and how inappropriate that is, it's a bad look on your business, so to speak. Or in this case, 670 the score. So, Jeff, I don't know if you got any thoughts on this, but in my opinion, it was the only decision was to fire him from 670 and his show.
Well, I'll just make it quick. I mean, obviously, he's got a lot of fans and supporters. A lot of people in the media are sad about him being gone. I mean, I have to agree with you, though. I mean, this is just one of those instances where, like, if anybody can learn a lesson from this, it's like, sometimes when we open our mouths, we just can't take back what we say. We got to think before we speak. This is an ultimate case of not being able to shove the toothpaste back into the tube. You worked a long career doing this, long career doing this stuff. And if you wanted to keep doing this, you got to be careful of things that come out of your mouth, because that, like, you are going to be, you have more of a spotlight on you due to what you do. So yeah, Bears junkie, somebody let the stupid get to him. That's exactly what happened. And it's unfair, or not unfair. It's unfortunate is what I meant to say. It's sad because, like I said, the guy he's got a lot of supporters. A lot of people liked him. There was another comment here. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Vizo, thank you for bringing this up, because I was thinking about this too. He was an ass with Barstool. If you guys don't know what happened with that situation, Barstool Sports, one of their guys came on to, there might have been a couple of their guys came on to 670 to score, and they were having a segment with these guys, and one of the Barstool people called Dan Bernstein. He called him Bernstein, and during the segment, he was asking him a question or making a statement to him, and he said Bernstein, and Bernstein got all upset about it, and he said, like, basically, you don't know me well enough to call me that. And so it started this whole shitstorm with Barstool and with their supporters and with people all over the internet giving him shit about it. And it's like, that was kind of like, I feel like that was kind of like where it all started to go downhill for him. The way he went about that with them when they came onto the show was extremely disrespectful. Mm-hmm. And the fact that, this is all going down now, it was kind of like, he was almost, I feel like he was almost like on his last straw, and to do something like that, that's really over the top. So I do agree with you, Tim. I think it was the right thing to do to let him go. It is sad. It's unfortunate, but like I said, we got to be careful about the things that come out of our mouth. If we have to think about the things we say. If we want this to not affect us in the way we don't want it to affect us, if that makes sense. So, anyways.
Well, and ironically, he doubled down on both situations. Like this situation, after the guy had stopped responding, he just kept going. Like, I'll take your silence as I don't remember what exactly he said. And then he went into a MAGA thing. But afterward, or before that, even with the Barstool Sports guy, at the end, after they close out the call, they end the call, you can see Bernstein in the background going, he called me. Like, it's like, really? You're still going on about that? Like, oh my gosh, man, calm down. It's not necessary. It's stupid. Just allow people to bother you like that. But in any case, maybe there was some stuff going on with him. Who knows? Maybe he ran out of medicine. Who knows? I don't know. just people are crazy. I'm glad that I don't have to worry about that kind of stuff, that I'm not one of those people.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's just kind of sad and unfortunate, but it's the reality of the situation is, you gotta, it's the accountability of life and work. Yep. and what we do. So let's move on. Let's talk about some Bears. Like Anthony says, let's get this thing going. So we got a lot obviously going on this time of the year. The draft is coming up, free agency is kind of starting to wind down now. There were a couple more signings this week. Bears brought in, we talked about Zacchaeus last week, didn't we? Yeah, we did.
Yes.
But then they brought in the kick returner, Devin Duvernay. He was most recently with Jacksonville. He was Baltimore. Was it Jacksonville?
No, I think he was in Jacksonville last year. Yeah.
Yeah, he was with Baltimore before though, and he was a very good return man in Baltimore. So, Pro Bowl level returner. I believe he's an All-Pro returner, if I'm not mistaken. It's a good signing for the Bears. He's a guy who can play in the slot. I don't think he's going to bring as much to the table as a receiver, as like Zacchaeus will, for instance. I think he was really brought in to mostly be a return guy. if you guys want my opinion, when I see this roster, and especially like these later signings at the end of free agency, and some of the moves that I've seen in the past that they've made, I think Richard Hightower has his fingerprints all over the back end of this roster. I think he has a lot of, what's the word? A lot of influence with this regime and the way they approach their special teams and the way they approach the guys who are going to make the back end of the roster. I think they see the importance of having guys that can fit and can play special teams well.
Well, and I think Ben Johnson realized that he was the only coach that knew what he was doing last year, so he kept him on.
That's possible too. I mean, there was an offense. Jim Dre got kept as the tight end coach as well. But
yeah,
I think there were a couple. Yeah, there's a couple quality control assistants and stuff as well. Like that.
Which, real quick, I'm kind of confused by that. This is now the second coaching staff in a row that Jim Dre has been retained, and outside of Cole Kmet, what else does he have to show for the tight ends? I mean, yeah, Cole Kmet's development's been excellent under his watch, but outside of him, we haven't really seen the tight end play. I mean, you couldn't bring in somebody else with that. I guess he just connections. Maybe he was comfortable with Ben Johnson. I have no idea, or Ben Johnson was comfortable with him. I don't know, but it's interesting, is it not? Like this is now the second new offensive staff that Jim Dre has been retained on, because he was a Luke Getsy hire.
If I had to guess, this is just me. The last two coordinators who came in and watched the tight end film probably thought, this is good tape. These guys play. Right. They know what they're doing. They're doing things the right way. They're coached well. So my guess is when Johnson came in, he said that he saw that going on, and he was like, we'll keep this guy. He's obviously got respect in his room. Kmet obviously likes him, or they would have let him go by now. Kmet's a big
Maybe that's why. Maybe Cole Kmet's like, don't fire my coach. Like this is my guy. Maybe that's why.
I don't know if he said that, but he probably did, give him some
rave review.
Yeah, he probably gave him a good review. He probably said, look, I like the way he coaches. I think he does a good job. Wouldn't be surprised, but they all have exit interviews. And I'm sure Ben Johnson, when he came in, asked some of their opinions.
Sure.
Why wouldn't he? Of course he did. So, I agree. I think that's kind of the reason why is they saw something there from both the tape and from the players that are here still, like especially Kmet. Like, they probably gave him a thumbs up, and said, bring him back. We like him. So, and again, another thing Johnson talked about before he came on, before he was actually, after he was hired is what I should say. And he started hiring these coaches. He said, look, I didn't want to go and just hire a bunch of people I knew. I wanted to have guys on my staff who I wasn't familiar with or necessarily comfortable with, because I want different ideas going around. So I think that might have been part of it as well. It's like, there's this guy here who I'm not familiar with, who seems like he's a good coach, who's going to bring a different philosophy than I'm used to, most likely. Why not leave him on staff? If it doesn't work out, it's a tight ends coach. I'll bring on a new one next year. So that's just my thought. Why not? I think it works out that way. I think it made sense. I just feel like they obviously saw that they felt he would do the job well. So anyways, speaking of going back to Duvernay, though, like I was saying about Hightower, it's like, obviously he has a lot of say and a lot of influence on the back end of the roster and the guys who are going to play special teams. Josh Blackwell just got re-signed too. If you guys don't remember, if you guys didn't see that. So that's another guy who's a huge contributor on special teams. And when he has to play defense, he plays well. So that's another guy he's been on the roster since the first year Poles got here as an undrafted free agent. He stuck around. He's a guy, and I've been a big fan of his since day one. Guy plays hard. The guy, and he, like I said, he's been a good special teamer since day one. He plays well on defense when he has to be in, when he's had to play. So I think that, like I said, I think he's got a lot of influence on the back end. I think he's going to continue to have that because his units do play well. So I'm going to be interested to see when they finally end up getting a new kicker and when that happens. Because they probably will continue to bring in UDFAs to give competition to Cairo, but I doubt any of those guys are ever going to beat him out. So I want to see when they're actually going to make a move to go get a kicker. I'm sure that'll be down the line and not really necessarily a pressing need But it wouldn't shock me, though, because like I said, we've in the past, he's had issues with kicking beyond 50 yards. So if they see a guy that they have conviction on, I wouldn't be surprised to see him go get him. But, there's so many other areas they could address right now. I don't know that that's the area you want to go. What were you going to say, Tim?
It's not going to happen. They're not going to be looking for another kicker. And we just talked about this a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, we did.
You don't get rid of a guy that can kick in Chicago accurately, because as we've seen, it's not probably the toughest place to kick in because of the wind and around that area. Guys struggle there. No, he does not have the biggest leg, but you can have a gigantic leg, and if you try to kick in those conditions, it doesn't matter how powerful your leg is if the wind ain't going to allow you to get it through. So, and it's going to push it back anyway. So, to me, the big leg part doesn't really matter. That's not as big of a deal. Now, if he wasn't able to kick like 50-yard field goals, he can kick 50 to 55 range, and he does it accurately, which is that's plenty. He's not going to kick a 60-yard field goal, but if you're kicking 60-yard field goals consistently, that's a problem. So, in my opinion, he's just fine. I don't think they're looking at that as a position of need where they need to replace him anytime soon. As long as his contract stays, or as long as he's still under contract, he's staying, unless he has some big drop off, this year or next. But in my opinion, he's going to be just fine. I don't see that happening at all. But that's just my opinion. But we can talk about some draft stuff here if you want to, Jeff, if you're ready to jump into that, because let's face reality. That's the direction everybody is in right now. That's where everybody wants to go. That's what we're getting ready. That's what's coming up here in just under a month or just over a month. That's going to be the big thing. So that's all everybody's wanting to talk about.
Let's just dig into this question right here, right now, because I think it's a good question. It's something has been addressed at length in the past. It's something we've all been thinking about because of the situation. There's obviously people who think Braxton is just fine, who think Amagaji still has potential. There's other people who say, I don't even want to deal with those guys ever again. Please draft somebody right now to take over at left tackle. Mm-hmm. So let me answer this question from J2K real quick, because I think this is a good question. He wants to know, with Campbell and Connerly both top 30 visits. By the way, this was reported through other outlets that these guys are coming in for top 30 visits.
These were confirmed.
Yeah, he's talking about Will Campbell from LSU and Josh Connerly from Oregon. So both these guys are left tackles in college, okay? He says it seems left tackle's a target. How do you feel about a left tackle at 39? And are you warming up to a left tackle at 10? I kind of have a couple thoughts on this, J2K, and then I'll let Tim have his turn on this. So first, I agree with you. I do think they're going to use an earlier round pick, whether it be their first round pick or whether it be one of their 2 second-round picks on a tackle. I do think they will use it on a tackle. And now, before I say my piece about Campbell, how would I feel about a left tackle at 39, as you asked? I'm fine with that. How do I feel about a left tackle at 10? I would be fine with that too, but here's my point. Here's my problem with a left tackle at 10. So in this particular draft, this is the reason why I'm not exactly gung-ho about taking a tackle at 10. There are serious question marks about whether or not Will Campbell can play tackle. We have talked about this at length in the past, right? Okay, this guy has sub 33-inch arms, or about 32 5/8.
I can't wait till it's my turn.
There's not a single tackle in the league who has arms shorter than that. Not a single one. The bare minimum that you look for in a tackle in this day and age is 33 inches, and you really want 34 plus. Mm-hmm. Ryan Poles, you guys want to take a guess at how long the arms are of Karan Amagaji and Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright, for that matter? Yeah. Every single one of them, 35 plus. All three. Those are the only 3 draft picks on tackle that Ryan Poles has made. So I've been saying this since day one. I don't think they're going to see Will Campbell as a tackle, because they have talked about from the beginning how important length is to them at that position. Now, another thing I want to bring up, I was watching CHGO, I think it was last week or earlier this week, and they were talking about Daniel Jeremiah, his most recent mock draft. He had the Bears taking Will Campbell at 10. And Adam Hogue said basically the same thing I've been telling you guys now for weeks. historically, based on what Ryan Poles has done, he would be surprised if they went the route of taking Will Campbell. I also would be surprised by that if they went the route of taking Will Campbell at 10. If they took him at 10, I don't know that they would see him as a tackle. I think they would see him long-term as a guard. They might give him a shot at tackle, but based on what we've seen, it would surprise me. That brings me to Connerly. He makes sense at 39. If I'm not mistaken, he does have the length. If the last time I looked, I believe he was one of those guys that met that threshold. Correct me if I'm wrong, you guys, but I'm pretty sure he's a fit, which is why they're bringing him in for a 30 visit. Now, this is what's interesting to me. Before you go on, Tim, again, I know I'm kind of going on a little bit here, but top 30 visits are important for the Bears. As we've seen from the past, the guys that they draft are typically guys that they bring in for top 30 visits. Mm-hmm. Last year, the only guy that they didn't bring in for a top 30 visit that they drafted was the punter, Torrey Taylor, the only one. And if you bring in a punter on 30 visit, teams are probably going to be keyed on the fact you really have interest in that guy. So they met him at the combine. They probably saw all they really needed to know there. You have to meet some of these other guys because you got to get an idea of whether you think it's going to work out. Now, I believe it was Greg, if I'm not mistaken, or somebody was talking about this last year. When you bring in some of these guys for 30 visits, sometimes you bring in anybody who you think another team might think you're interested in because they're going to believe, okay, they brought him in, they're interested in him, so now we got to consider either taking him or jumping them to get this guy. And it also might bring teams to think that you like that guy, so maybe you're going to go in a different direction. It's a smoke screen kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? So I think Will Campbell could be one of two things. Either he's a smoke screen 30 visit, or he's a guy they're legitimately interested in as an interior offensive lineman. But that's another thing too, is a lot of people aren't sure that he can really play guard because of the way he plays so upright. But there's other people who say he's so good, they don't doubt he can play the position. So I don't know. He's a really intriguing guy to me. I'm going to be really, really curious to see what happens with him. I just don't see him as a fit with the Bears, J2K. The only tackle in this draft, in my opinion, before I swing it over to Tim, in the top 10, who, by the way, on his talent, let me make that very clear, on his talent is worthy of a top 10 pick is Simmons from Ohio State. Based on his talent and his length and his traits and all that, he's worthy of that. The injury concern is a legitimate concern for me. I mean, that was a patella thing. Everybody I hear that has who has any kind of knowledge about this kind of stuff with as far as like injuries and rehabilitation and stuff like that, everybody I see talking about that has mentioned real concern about this for him, especially because of the position he plays. So after what we saw with Amagaji last year, it's another thing I've been saying multiple times here on the show. With what we saw with Amagaji last year, not even being ready at training camp, not being ready to go until the season was actually going and ready, it doesn't make any sense to bring in a guy like that if you have concern that he's not going to be ready to go. If you think he's your long-term solution, maybe, but the problem still is, do we know that he can make that full recovery from that? That's the question mark. And are you willing to waste a top 10 pick on a guy? Or I shouldn't say waste. Are you willing to use a top 10 guy, a top 10 pick on a guy that is a risk, a real risk of whether he's going to be your long-term solution? Go ahead, Tim.
Okay. A lot to unpack here. I'll start with the Campbell part. Okay, the first part, although I may need you to pull up that question again at some point, but I can start with the Campbell part. There is zero chance, in my opinion, and I would say in every NFL mind's opinion, a 0% chance that the Bears would bring in Will Campbell to be a tackle. He's not a tackle in the NFL. Guys, I've seen a lot of comments here about how Braxton Jones has the real long arms and he still can't block. There's a lot of things to dig into that. I'm not as low on Braxton Jones as a lot of people are, although I will say I don't think he's the long-term solution, and I do believe he's hit his ceiling. I don't think he's as bad as everybody thinks, number one. Number two, guys' length does matter in this league more than you think. And there's a lot of people saying, he didn't seem to bother him at LSU. Well, guys, there's a big difference in the competition level, number one, in college than there is the NFL. And the other part of that is there's a lot of variable measurables in college to the NFL. Arm length and things like that aren't as big of a deal in college. Nobody's looking for that in college. But in the NFL, they do. They don't bring in... There's only one tackle in the NFL that has sub 33-inch arms. One. Guys, it does not happen for a reason. Because if you watch his tape, one thing that Campbell struggles with more than anything is guys getting around the edge, and he doesn't have the length to get his arms out. Guys coming around him that have length on him. It shows on tape there. What do you think is going to happen in the NFL, guys, where you have these really long, super athletic, stronger than him defensive ends and tackles in the NFL? They're going to find a way to get around.
I've seen analysts talking about his narrow shoulders too.
Yes. Now, look, I'm not saying he's not a great player, because he is. But he's not. They're not drafting him to play tackle. Excuse me. I think there's no chance? Go ahead.
Real quick, J2K mentions 5 offensive tackles have sub 33-inch arms. How many are starting tackles in J2K? There's only got to be like one. I think
there's
it's
one
Ryman.
starter.
Ryman from the Colts is the only starting left tackle who has sub 33-inch arms. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure as far as left tackles, he is the only one.
I'm pretty sure you're right. I think it's only one starter. The other part of this is, do I think that there's no chance that the Bears could draft Campbell? No, they could, but I'm telling you right now, they're not going to draft him to play tackle. There's no way.
Real quick, Tim. I'm sorry. I know I'm interrupting you again, but look, I want to mention D. Levine's comment here because he's got a good point here. We're talking about a half an inch from being acceptable, but the problem with that, Levine, is a half inch when you're talking about the bare minimum being 33. That does make it a big deal because, like I said earlier, that the goal is for 34 plus.
Yeah, that was the other part I was going to say.
A minimum is 33. So when you're talking about a half inch there, it is it can matter. Go ahead.
It's a half an inch below the minimum. That's the difference. If you were talking, well, he's got 33 and a half inch arms, he's only a half inch below acceptable. 32 and a half is an inch and a half below acceptable. This is below the minimum. And that's what the difference is in this case. Now, not everybody's going to have the length like that. That's just part of it. But at tackle in the NFL, you have to have that length. And I'm telling you, teams look for that. That's what they look for, especially the Bears. And I understand that Ben Johnson is here. But at the end of the day, the profile for offensive linemen that Ryan Poles is looking for is not going to change depending on the coach, except for maybe weight and athleticism and things like that. But as far as the profile, what he likes in length and all of those things, that will not change. And the reason is, look, Ben Johnson can come in and say, hey, I don't want this guy. Ryan Poles is not going to draft that guy if the coach says, no, I don't want him. But if Ryan Poles has a player on his profile and he says, I'm taking this guy, as long as it's not a player that Ben Johnson says he won't coach, Ryan Poles is going to take the guy. And it's not like Ben Johnson's going to say, hey, I want you to take this guy. It doesn't work that way. Does that make sense? These scouts and the GMs, they put in all of this time scouting these players. The coach spends very minimal time. The players are brought to the coach, and then the coach says whether or not he can coach them or not. He's not necessarily going in there and saying, hey, this is the guy we're drafting, which is why at the end of the day, it's going to default onto Ryan Poles of what type of offensive lineman or any position he wants to bring in. And this is something that we've seen with him now for the last 2 tackles that he has drafted, that this is what is important for him is that length. So in my opinion, 0% chance they bring him in to play tackle, maybe play guard. But Aldo, if you could pull up the other part of that question, I'll finish my point here. The other part was, how do we feel at a left tackle 39 and 10? Okay, the only tackle that I would be that I would accept at 10 is Armin Membu, because I believe he can play tackle. Could he play the left side? Maybe. Who knows? But in my opinion, he is the best offensive line or offensive lineman in this draft. And at 10, he would be a worthy pick there, and he could play a tackle or a guard spot. Maybe you want him to be your left tackle of the future. You could sit him and develop him right now behind, or at least he's there to push Amagaji and Braxton Jones. Maybe he wins the job outright. You never know. But he's also, I think he's going to be an excellent guard in the NFL. I think he's a Pro Bowl caliber guard. And he can play right tackle if Darnell Wright gets hurt. So to me, that's a guy you take at 10. And I've been on this train since the beginning, and I'm not getting off of it. Like, that's the best offensive lineman in this draft, and he's also very versatile. At 39, I would absolutely be open to a left tackle, obviously. And I do like Connerly. And like Jeff said, whoever they have in for top 30s, those are people you should be looking at, guys. Those are the guys they're looking at. So we'll see what happens. But yes, I would certainly be on board for tackle. I wouldn't be against tackle at 10, but I think it's got to be Membu. As far as Josh Simmons, I know you talked about Jeff, and I know you love him, J2K, but the knee thing is a problem for me. Even if they come back and say he's fully healthy, I'm not risking my number 10 overall pick on a guy that I'm not sure he's always going to be able to play. Yes, they may say he's fine now, but there's a high risk for re-injury there, especially with an offensive lineman who has to anchor, and there's a lot of weight and a lot of lateral movement that goes on that knee. I just don't trust it. It scares me. To me, you got to hit on this pick. Even if you sit him for a year, whoever it's going to be, you still got to know that that's a legitimate starter in the future that you can't. Of course, anybody could get hurt at any point in time, but in my opinion, you don't take a guy that's already injured that you're not sure can play. We just dealt with this last year. We're still not sure if Braxton Jones is going to play, if he's going to be ready to start the season now. You can't take that risk, in my opinion, because what happens if Braxton Jones isn't healthy? You bring in Simmons, who clearly probably isn't going to play early this year, and then Karan Amagaji gets hurt. You got nothing at tackle. So it's not something I would take a chance on. So, Jeff, I don't know if you want to move on from that, but I think we've kind of spent plenty of time on that conversation. And this is something we've talked about a lot over the last several weeks, specifically Josh Simmons and that left tackle position and at 10. So I'm not against it, J2K, at all. I would be open to the idea of taking a tackle at 10. But again, in my opinion, the only one that I would take there is Membu. I don't like Kelvin Banks. I think he spends too much time on his rear end. He's very just like Coleman Shelton. Yes, he steadily improved, but I'm not sold on Banks tape. I'm not. As far as honestly, there's not really, outside of him and Simmons and Membu, there's not really one in the top of this draft that I think is a tackle. The rest of them are guards. So that's just my opinion. I don't know. We'll see. Again, at the end of the day, it's going to depend on what they do. It's not it. We can all talk about this ad nauseum, but until we see it happen with our own eyes and ears, it's hard to say. But I will say Ryan Poles has been very consistent in his process and how he does things. And he has, he has a certain profile he looks for. He has a certain profile that he avoids. An injury is one of those things. I don't see him getting away from that. I don't see him changing his philosophy. I just don't see that happening. Even with Ben Johnson in there now, who's going to have some input, I just don't see that completely changing based on the coach. So we'll see. I don't know, but we've done. I've done a couple of mocks recently. The one you guys may remember. Go ahead. Go ahead. I was just using that as a reference point. Go ahead with what your thought was.
Before you start getting it, there's a bunch of comments in here that I want to address because you guys are all there's a lot of good points you're making in here. And I want to address it because I don't disagree with what you guys are saying. I'm simply telling you guys historically what the Bears have done, why I don't think these things will happen. And I do tend to agree with King Book World in here when he says no more hurt players. As far as like premium draft picks, especially, don't use those picks on guys who are hurt. Just bring in guys who are ready to go, who are ready to play, who can help contribute, Whether you bring in a guy who can play tackle right away or whether he's a long-term guard, I don't really care as long as he's a guy who's a long-term solution at the end of the day. There's a bunch of comments in here I want to address. So let me start to get to some of these.
Yeah, I'm seeing some of these too. These are wild.
There's some good ones here. So let me start with, I know Dennis and D. Levine made a handful of good ones in here. I want to see if I can find. So first of all the way back here from Dennis, he mentioned a couple things right away. Ask any lineman, footwork and anchor are more important. We're talking about than arm length is what he's mentioning this over. And how the Chargers left tackle, that's Rashawn Slater, is starting over the monster Joe Alt. Now, to be fair, you're not going to move your starting left tackle, who has been a very good left tackle in the league, to the right side for your guy who's a rookie draft pick just because he has those traits that your other guy doesn't. He's been entrenched in position and had good success. They put in Joe Alt on the right side, and he's been a great player there already. So it was fine. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. The thing with Slater, he is kind of an exception. He does have shorter arm length. I think he is just at like 33. But he is one of those guys that he's the exception. He's a very, very good player who has found a way to make it work. He also plays for a team in a previous regime under Tom Telesco, who clearly did not care so much about his arm length. He thought he could get it done. And I'm just telling you guys, based on what the Bears have done, I don't see them doing that because of the guys that they have targeted in the past. And because of that, I mentioned to you guys before the video, the 1920 football video, where they showed the important traits for tackles and how length was the number one trait there. I just think with this team, that's what they're going to look at. Now, I will be curious to see if Ben Johnson has some kind of serious influence on that, though, as far as like the length and whether or not that is as important anymore. I just don't see how a guy who's been an offensive lineman, who has an offensive lineman's mentality, how when that's the most important thing to him for an offensive lineman, I don't see his philosophy changing that much. But that's just my opinion. Tim, I know you wanted to make a point, but there's a couple more things in here I want to mention.
I was just going to say about Slater. He's also incredibly athletic for his, for where he's at.
So is Campbell.
Campbell's not nearly the athlete that Slater is. Not even close. Not nearly that. Not nearly as much.
And then Levine makes a comment that you draft Campbell to compete with Jones. If it doesn't work out and he turns out to be a Pro Bowl guard, is it really a loss? Not necessarily, D. Levine. But I think if you're looking to, at the end of the day, you do want your 10th overall pick to be a long-term piece of the puzzle. But you really want it to be a guy who's going to contribute right away, too. And I'm not sure that Campbell comes in and contributes right away. Maybe. Does he win the job? Does he win the left tackle job right away? I don't know. But again, it's like I said, I just don't see Campbell making sense because of what they've done in the past. I really, truly believe that bringing him in was more or less either a smokescreen, or if they do really like him, I think it's more as a guard. And maybe they won't be afraid to draft a guard 10th overall, especially because the two guards that they have are, number one is a 32-year-old, and the other guy, Jonah Jackson, is you really don't know for sure if he's going to pan out. You have 2 years of guaranteed money to him, but you still are going to need a guard at some point. So it wouldn't shock me, Levine. I don't know that I would love that decision because of that, but I do agree with what most of you guys are saying in here about Will Campbell. I think he's going to be a good player, and there's a very good likelihood he could be a tackle. I just don't think he'd be a tackle for the Bears, if that makes sense to you guys, because of what we've seen them doing. So I wouldn't hate it. I just don't see it. So we may agree to disagree on that. Now, there was another comment in here that you guys are making about Membo.
Mm-hmm.
I do think Membo is the right tackle if he is a tackle. I think he's more of a guard in the league, in my personal opinion.
I agree, too.
I think he's more of a guard than he is a tackle. Wouldn't be surprised to see a team take him to play tackle. I think he's a guy yes, the combine did do him some favors because we did see.
Hold on, though. This is something I want to mention.
I'm not done. I want to talk about his team.
I'm going to get mad. You go ahead.
I'm not done. Okay. There was a comment in here, I believe it was from Dennis, saying that he was a third-round guy before the combine, and that's simply just not true, Dennis.
No.
If you were listen to any other analyst there might be a couple people who thought he was a third-round guy, but most people who are tuned in and watch tape, like Greg's a perfect example. Greg, who who's with us on the Barroom Network here, who has his own show, Gabriel Talks Football. He's talked many times about Membo before.
He loves Membo.
He's always loved Membo. Loves his tape. Before the combine even was happening, before the combine even happened, he was talking about it. Membo was a first-round pick from the beginning. Now, I will say he's gone from being more of a guy whether that could go from 10 to like 25. Now it's almost for sure he's going top 15, top 10. And I think the combine did help him with that because all it did was just it confirmed his athletic ability that he showed on tape. Yes. That's what I'm trying to say. So,
and I think there might have been some concern about his arm length too, because he's only 6'3.5", but his arms are 33.5. So he can definitely play tackle. Yes.
So let me see if I can find. There was a couple other ones in here, but go ahead with any points you want to make real quick. Tim.
I was just gonna. I'll piggyback off what you're saying because I saw a lot of comment here about that he was a third-round pick and that he shot up draft boards. Guys, he's not shooting up the draft board like Jeff said. He might have moved up a little bit just because those things were confirmed from tape. I saw some guys say he loafed on tape. Membo's tape is fantastic. I don't know if you guys are just trolling me and trying to make me feel like I'm crazy, but. Yeah, his tape is excellent. He looks really good. I don't know what you guys have watched. I've watched a lot of Membo up to this point, and he's just super athletic, good anchor, strong in protection in the pass and the run game. He can play all over the line, in my opinion. He showed that he can move around. I'm a big fan of his, and that's why I think he's the best lineman in this draft based on what I've seen from him. So... I mean, I don't know. Maybe you guys think I'm crazy, but that's what I've seen. I don't know if it's a troll or what, but just watching the tape that I've seen of him, I like him a lot. Maybe he does loaf on occasion. I haven't watched enough of his tape to see if he truly does that often or not. But those are some things that you can coach up to. You can't coach what he already has, and that's that unreal athleticism and ability that he's got. The guy ran a sub 540 at 320 pounds. Grant, and that's the other part. He's over 320. He is a big, big boy. And he can play all down. His guys, watch his feet. His footwork is insane. He has unbelievable footwork for a guy that size and frame. Those are some of the hardest things to do. And that's why he's got a great anchor and he's got great lateral agility. So I think he's top 10. Absolutely think he's top 10 talent. I said this before the combine, guys. Jeff, you can be my witness. I've been saying this is a guy the Bears could look at 10 from the beginning. Now, I did admittedly say I would prefer them to trade down and pick him up in like the 14 to 15 range, but now he may not fall that far because of the combine. But I've been saying it since day one. That was a guy I'd be looking at, was Membu. I really like his tape, and I like the player, and he's just a good football player. Guys, if you don't take my word for it, take our resident scout here that was the scouting director of the Chicago Bears says how much he likes Armand Membu. Go listen to what Greg says, guys. We're not crazy.
Danny Shimon likes him a lot too. Danny Shimon likes him a lot too.
Yes.
He's another guy with a lot of scouting.
There's a lot of analysts that like him a lot. And I've heard multiple guys say that he's the best guard or best offensive lineman in this draft.
There are people who think he is. I don't know how I quite feel about that. I think his really good tape, like when he's at his best, is excellent. It really is. And there probably is some loafing and stuff in there, like you guys are talking about. At this point, I would be surprised if the Bears went that direction because of the guard moves that they've made. And the same goes for Campbell. Like I said, I'd be surprised by that move. Now, this is why I want to get to. There's a couple more comments in here. Dennis made one that I totally agreed with. Gosh dang it, where'd it go? Let me see if I can find it.
Hang on. Aldo, I care. I do, buddy.
Let me see if I can find it. But you made a comment in here, Dennis, about you wanted a monster edge rusher. And I kind of agree with you as far as where we're at right now because of the moves they made. I kind of want them to go that direction in the first round. If you have to stay at 10 because you can't get a trade down partner, which is kind of the direction I've been telling you guys I lean towards, if they can move down, I would prefer to see that from what my vantage point is now. But if you can't, in either case, I think I like to take an edge rusher here. I like the guy from Georgia a lot, Mykel Williams. He's got the length. He's got the athleticism. Too. He's had good production. He had a bit of an injury at his last year at Georgia, but it was an ankle sprain thing. Just those things can linger. It's not a long-term concern by any stretch. I think this guy's going to be a really good football player.
Well, and defensive linemen from Georgia have been excellent in the NFL over the last few years.
Scheme, like I said, he's 270 pounds. He's got length. He's got size. He makes a lot of sense. He's a good run defender. I just think he's a guy. If you're at 10 and he's there, you can't move down. He makes a lot of sense to me. There's another comment in here. There's Dennis's comment about the edge rusher. What else there was another comment in here I saw that I really liked a lot. Tooch, you had a good question here I wanted to get to. Which players are worth top 10 picks for you guys? Who are the blue chip players? The thing with this particular draft, Tooch, that I think is interesting is when you talk about blue chip players, you normally think when you're in the top 10, you're probably going to get a blue chip guy. Right. But I don't think that there's 10 guys in this draft that are blue chip players. I don't think that there's 10 really top 10 worthy picks in this draft.
I agree.
As you would have in other years for the most part, which is, not the best problem to have. So if I had to say the guys that I think are like the blue chip players in this draft, Carter is definitely one. I think Mason Graham from Michigan is going to be a very, very, very good player.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of some of the other guys at the top right now. And
it's like the ones that everybody talks about are the Carter, obviously, Travis Hunter. Here's the problem with Hunter. Travis Hunter probably is a blue chip football player. The problem with him is I don't think that he is exceptional at corner or wide receiver.
I think he's going to be a phenomenal.
Maybe, but I don't know if he has one actual position that he's exceptional at. And
I think it's asking a lot. I think it's asking a ton.
It is
to have a guy come in and play two sides in the NFL. It's a lot of snaps. It's going to wear the shit out of your body. Yep. I think long term, that is not what's going to be in his best interest. I think he's a corner in the league.
I do too.
And a damn good one. Like a damn good one. So he is a blue chip player to me, even as just a corner. So,
well, let me ask you this. I will ask you that really quickly before we move on. If he didn't have the wide receiver ability, would he still be a top 5 pick in the draft?
I just said yes.
I'm not so sure that he would be.
I think he is that good as a corner. Yes,
I don't know.
He's a phenomenal athlete. He's sticky.
Yes, he is.
He runs routes for the receivers. He's a very, very good corner prospect. I think he's a top flight prospect. Absolutely, 100%.
Fair enough.
Even as just a corner.
Fair enough.
So
don't know if I agree with that, but
I still like edge. And I saw somebody here mention James Pierce and how he's got the off-field issue. He's kind of a jackass. There's another problem with Pierce. He's got short arms, as we've talked about before. Bears don't like the guys on the edge with short arms. They just don't go for guys like that. So I don't see that as being a fit for him or Mike Green because of the fact that those two guys have shorter arms. But there are some guys in the draft that have that length that I think are good fits. I think in the second round, if Landon Jackson from Arkansas is around in that area, I think he makes some sense there. He's got some good traits. So let me see. I'm trying to go through some of you guys' comments here, but I really agree with what Dennis said earlier. At this point, I would love to see an edge rusher be taken in the first round.
Yep.
Just because of what we've seen happen so far. But I know there's a lot of people who would like to see Genty. I think the Bears have certainly set themselves up to where they could do that if they wanted to, if they liked him there. I'm not the biggest fan of that, and I've told you guys multiple times why. To give you the short answer for anybody who hasn't seen, I don't think the Bears are that close yet. I don't think they're a running back away. I think the positional value of running backs, although it is going up, I just don't think it's worthy of taking a guy in the top 10 right now. And he's probably going to go in the top 10. He's probably going to be gone before the Bears even get to pick. So here's a comment here from Dennis. He says his dream draft is Kenneth
Grant. I like all 4 of those guys.
Amari and Hampton or Xavier. 4 of them. Combination. I love Grant. I think he would be a great fit. I think he's a late first round guy or later first round guy. So if the Bears move down and decide they wanted to take a shot at him, I think he's your Andrew Billings replacement of the future. If they did that, I would not mind a Kenneth Grant being taken if they did. I don't think he's the top 10.
Let's get into that, Jeff. Can we do that?
I want to address the rest of his question here, and then we can dig into whatever you want. Mike Green, as I told you before, Dennis, I love his tape. I think he's a good player, and I think he can have a very good career in the league. Don't think he's a fit for the Bears, though, because of what I said earlier with the arm length concerns. But I think he's going to be a good player, and I think another team is going to get a really good guy there. and you can have your opinions on whether you like it or not that the Bears function that way. I don't know that I necessarily love it all the time, but there's a reason that they have those thresholds. And for the most part, who was it I think it was it's either Bill Parcells or it was Jimmy Johnson said, if you start drafting exceptions, players that are exceptions, you end up with a team full of exceptions.
I think it was Bill Parcells. Jimmy Johnson had a different philosophy.
I do think it was Parcells, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if it's like a player, right, one player that you have conviction in, fine. But I don't think Mike Green makes a ton of sense. Now, Tim loves Hampton. He's talked about him at length. I think there's a good chance that Hampton's going to go first round now, I think.
Hampton is a better fit for what the Bears need than Genty anyway.
I think he could be.
Yes.
I don't know. Again, though, I don't know if I love the idea of taking a running back in the first round for the Bears, even if they move down. I just don't know that I like that.
Well, let's talk about that.
Xavier Watts, the last guy he mentioned there. I like Xavier Watts a lot. I think he's a guy who he does kind of make sense for the Bears.
Very much so.
He's got a lot of ball production. I think he's a second round guy. If the Bears could get him at 39 or 41, I wouldn't mind it. I think now because of the moves that they've made in free agency, that they could very well take a safety now in the second round. It wouldn't be a huge deal because it probably is a guy who's going to be a future piece. You know, Byard and Brisker are both they're both on the last years of their deals here.
We don't have a single safety on this roster next year. We don't have a single one.
Byard is probably not a long-term solution, and Brisker, we don't know with his concussion history what the deal is with him, whether he's a long-term solution or not. So. I think I wouldn't mind a pick of Watts there. I think it makes sense in the second round, Dennis. So I like three of those four guys as fits for the Bears. I wouldn't like the Bears taking Hampton in the first round. I just think that Green is the one guy in there that I don't think makes sense for them. But I like your ideas there. I think they're all going to be good football players. So go ahead, Tim. Whatever you wanted to say. I know you were trying to get something off your chest there. So go ahead and do that. But
I want to get into this.
Genty has an extra gear that Hampton just does not have. He does.
But that's why we have DeAndre Swift. That's what DeAndre Swift is supposed to provide.
Well, yes, but I was just going to say I still don't think Genty he's got really good speed, but I don't think he's quite like that Jahmyr Gibbs kind of speed that we saw in that year. So that's just my opinion. Go ahead, Tim.
So I want to kind of go in this direction because I've been thinking a lot about this the last few days, and honestly, I think I see two positions that the Bears need more than anything. Like two starting caliber positions the Bears need. Excuse me. Obviously, the offensive and defensive lines are still the areas that need the most, but I think they need the most depth, not starters. I think they have all the starters they're going to have at this point, except for maybe the opposite edge, which I doubt. I think Adangbo is your other starter. They need depth. Starting position-wise, they need a starting running back, and they need a starting safety. In my opinion, I don't know if Brisker is going to play, and how long is he going to play. I think you have to replace him or be prepared to replace him, and I also think you have to be prepared to replace Byard because this is the last year. We don't have a single safety under contract after this year. None. Zero. So I kind of want to get into this because I've had a couple scenarios going through my mind. Okay. We're starting to see that the two best running backs in this draft, I think it's Genty and Hampton, and then there's a big drop off to the next three. But I think the top five are clearly the best in this draft. And then there's a huge drop off after five. But I think it goes Genty. It's like Genty, Hampton, Henderson, Judkins, Caleb Johnson, whatever order you want to take those last three in. But I think there's a significant drop-off between Hampton and the rest. So I thought some scenarios in my head like they're going to take a running back at some point in this draft, probably one like that. And I could 100% see Ben Johnson wanting to get that running back early if it's a guy that's a huge difference maker like I think those top two guys probably are. I don't think Hampton's falling to the second round. I don't see that happening anymore. So I've thought they could either trade down with that first pick, obviously, and draft him somewhere in the first round that way, I've also thought maybe it's a possibility they trade down in round 1, pick up an additional second-round pick, select a defensive lineman or an offensive lineman with that first-round pick, and then maybe they trade back into the bottom of round 1 with some of those second-round picks. Maybe they accrue an extra one. They use 2 twos, move back into the bottom of the first round, and then they take an Omarion Hampton there. What are the chances that they do that? So I went ahead with scenario 1. I did a mock draft today, another one. I've only done 3, by the way. So it's not like I've done this countless times trying to find the outcome that I want. I'm just seeing how this is going to shake up, and I'm trying to do it based on who I think will actually be there or I think could possibly fall if they're there. Like, okay, I could see them falling. If I look and I say that there's no chance that player will be there, I wouldn't even think to draft them. So this was my first draft. I took Membu. I was able to get Hampton in the second round and then on. And I don't think Jared Wilson will be there at 72 either, but this was my first draft. Okay. And I like the idea of Membo there and taking the extra guard for the future possible tackle. And then you got your running back, but I don't think this is a very realistic scenario. Number one, I doubt Membu is going to make it to 10 at this point. I doubt that'll happen. And I really doubt Hampton's getting to 39. There is a chance, but unlikely. So today I did another one. If you have that, Aldo, we can look at that. But I'll tell you, I was able to move back. So I think it might have been Atlanta that wanted to move up to, or no, it was Arizona, I think. Arizona wanted to move up to 10. I made a deal with them. This is where I think you could see the Bears go with a guy like Hampton or Genti, one of them, if they were to fall to 16. Well, I guess it wouldn't be really falling for Hampton, but if they were able to trade down in the first round, then I could see them taking it back in the first round. I don't see them taking one at 10, but I could see them taking one in the teens or further down if they make it there. So I was able to trade down, and I accrued pick number 47. So that gives us our third second-round pick, and I believe I also picked up I picked a third-rounder for next year in that deal. I can't remember. So in any case, I took Hampton with that first-round pick. I could see them taking a running back for sure, and that's one that I think is a perfect fit here. You guys have heard me talk about him over and over and over again. I just think he's the best fit for what they need right now. Imagine a Marion Hampton with DeAndre Swift. I think that's a perfect combination. It gives you that David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs combo that you're looking for. That kind of thing that I'm sure Ben Johnson's looking for is that thunder and lightning, Sonic and Knuckles, whatever you want to call it. It's the perfect spot for that, in my opinion. So, second round, Kenneth Grant. Okay, everybody, I really like Kenneth Grant, and the more I thought about this, I thought there really is a realistic possibility that he could fall to 39. Because the guy that everybody would prefer of the two Michigan guys, I think, most likely is Mason Graham. He's the more polished player. Carl, who was on our show a couple weeks ago, told us, this guy's a Hall of Famer, future Hall of Famer. So I like Kenneth Grant a lot. I think there is a ton of upside. A lot of people think he's the better player in the future. I love this one. I love Grant, and I really do think there is a scenario now where he could fall to 39. So I went ahead and took him because I thought he was the best player there. And then at 41, I addressed that need at safety. I've talked about Watts extensively here, and I have taken him in both of these mock drafts at 41 because he was available there. And I do think there's a good chance he is available there. And I'm telling you guys, safety is a much bigger concern than what the national media is talking about. We don't have any safeties under contract after this year. I don't see a scenario where Brisker gets extended. I don't see a scenario where Byer is extended except for maybe a year or two. They need a safety, and Watts is a perfect ball hawk for what you're looking for here. And he can play in the box. He is that safety that's got some versatility here. I'm going to try to buzz through these pretty quickly from here on. Princely Umanah-Malin, I don't even know if I'm saying that right. I really, really like this guy at edge. There's a chance that he could fall this far into the second round. He was here at this time. I went ahead and took him. I really like him on the edge. Great rotational piece, in my opinion. And then at 72, I took Darius Alexander. I believe he's most likely a one tech. He's a big bodied guy. He's got some versatility inside. He's played multiple positions inside at defensive tackle. Behemoth of a guy. This is, in my opinion, most likely your rotational Billings replacement. Grant could also be your Billings replacement. It gives you two guys who've got some versatility on the inside at tackle. I really like a lot of what I've read about Darius Alexander. Haven't seen a ton of his tape, but he looks good from what I've seen. Luke Kandra, offensive guard here from Cincinnati. Really, really good in the run game and in pass protection. Underrated guy here. He'd be a very value pickup there, in my opinion. 168. I actually traded back into the draft for this pick. I actually traded down from 148 to 158, and then I was able to move back in using some of that capital that I got. Got us a linebacker. Jack Kaiser, in my opinion, would be a perfect Sam. Good replacement here for Jack Sanborn on those downs. Jack Kaiser is also a former safety, so he can play. He's got that versatility where there's times where you may want to play him instead of Kyler Gordon, and he could play that nickel safety spot instead of the nickel corner spot. I really like Jack Kaiser a lot there. Jalen Travis, guy with really crazy traits. 6'7", 320 pounds, really long. Guy who's got a lot of he's a good player. I'll say that. But it's going to be some development there most likely. But he's a guy that he's got a lot of experience at tackle in college football. I think he would be a really good guy to bring in and develop, possibly to have on the outside over the years. And like I said, the traits are pretty insane. 6'7", long arms. And then 240, I took Caleb Ransaw. He's a corner from Tulane, but this guy has played nickel corner. He's played safety. He's played outside. I think he's an excellent special teams prospect. This is a guy who Richard Hightower could grab and say, hey, this guy is great for what I want to do here. I looked at him like a great special teams player. And like I said, he had a lot of versatility at the defensive back positions. I could see that being a guy that they would covet there. And at 240, that's why not take a flyer on a guy like that in the 7th round? So let me know what you guys think. We need to start closing up the show here in a few minutes, but let me know what you think about this. Jeff, what are your thoughts about it? Like I said, a lot of room here. In my opinion, this is the best draft that I have looked at of my own that I've done so far. Of the 3 I've done, this is my favorite one, and I think it's the best one of them all. There's a lot of starting caliber players and there's a lot of depth in my opinion. You're probably muted because I can't hear you.
I'll just make my points quick. Sorry about that. I was typing stuff. I didn't want everybody to hear that. But I'll try to be quick about this. I would like this draft. I like I told you guys earlier, I'm not gung-ho about taking a running back in the 1st round. But if that's what they do, like I told you guys before, they've certainly opened themselves up to that possibility. So it wouldn't shock me.
I will say this really quick. I wouldn't take one at 10. The only way I'm taking a back is if I move down and accrue an extra pick.
And then as far as Kenneth Grant, I don't see any way he's going to fall to 39. J2K said he thinks he doesn't make it past 20. And then I think it was Dennis said he doesn't get past 15. I agree with you guys. I don't think there's any way he falls out of the back half of the 1st round. So, as far as Watts, I already told you guys my thoughts on Watts. I like him a lot. Umami Allen, he's a guy that's got traits from Mississippi. I think he's either had, I can't remember if it was an injury concern that he had or if it was like a production thing with him.
He's got production. He's definitely got production.
I think he's had some injury issues in his past, and that's why people are seeing him as more of a 2nd round guy. But I wouldn't hate that either. I think he's got, like I said, he's a guy with some traits. Alexander, if he's there, which I don't think he's going to fall as far as 72. He's a guy who makes sense as a one tech. Kandra, I haven't done a ton of work on, so I'd have to watch him a little bit more. Kaiser, I agree with what you guys are saying. Aldo mentioned Kaiser would need to run like a 4.7 to be a fit for the Bears. I agree with that as far as a draft pick anyways. Because I don't think he ends up being like a UDFA. Somebody's going to take him. but I don't think he's going to run real well. So I don't see him being a fit for the Bears in that regard. But I do think I agree with J2K's comment that he'd be a really good special teamer. I do think Kaiser would be a good special teamer. And
guy has a ton of experience too. A ton.
Yeah, he does. He does have a ton of experience, like a 5th or 6th year player. So, and then as far as the last two guys, I don't really know a ton about them either. I really got to do some more work on like the later round prospects to see which guys have like the traits and could be fits, as like guys you take flyers on. So, I think it's a good draft, Tim. Like I said to you guys before, I don't love the idea of taking a running back in the first round. I still am on board at this point with like where the Bears are and what the needs that they have addressed already. I think edge makes a lot of sense in the first round. And I was pounding for an edge last year in the first round. So after Caleb was taken. So I don't hate the Rome pick by any stretch. Don't get me wrong, guys. I love Rome, but I just think that, they still need an edge rusher. And it's been obvious, for the last couple of years now. So if we can get one, it'd be great, especially one that makes a lot of sense, which I think Williams does. So I think he does. And actually, I believe it was Mel Kiper that just mocked Mykel Williams to the Bears. So Flex says if they don't see an O lineman they want in the first, they go DN, then a D tackle they like falls in the second. Why not? Let's attack quarterbacks and put them in turf. No, I agree with you, Flex. That I know what you're saying. I think your comment is about what I said earlier about Kenneth Grant. Because I mentioned that I like what you said about taking the edge first and then taking a guy like Grant with their second pick. I just don't think Grant falls far enough for them to take with their second pick, if that makes sense. So let's say the Bears take a guy at 10. I don't think Grant's there at 39 or 41. Let's say the Bears move down from 10. I still don't think they're going to accrue another pick that's either early enough in the first round or even a second round pick that's going to be high enough for them to get Kenneth Grant. I think he's going to go early enough to where that's going to be awfully hard for them to do unless they pick up another first rounder this year, an early one, like top 20. So
listen, though, every year we say this.
Love him as a player.
Every year somebody says there's no chance this guy has fallen that far in the draft, and every year somebody falls in the draft. And this is a guy I could see. This is the one guy, Kenneth Grant, that I could see falling to that spot in the second round. So just my opinion. But Jeff, I'll give you real quick. Luke Kandra, his scouting report, number one, his RAS score, 9.19. We know how they are about RAS scores. Really, really high RAS score. He transferred from Louisville to Cincinnati after 2 years. He's an above-average athlete, gets out the ball quickly, moves well in space. Physical offensive line, plays with a high motor in the run game. Disciplined player, and he has only been penalized twice his entire college career. That's a huge deal for me. 0 sacks and 8 pressures allowed on 447 snaps this past year. The one knock on him is he has stiff hips, which kind of can at times impact his pad level. Strong anchor and pass pro and hold up against the run. So that guy sounds a lot like a Bear, guy that they look for. And again, that RAS score is incredibly high. And who was the last guy that the other guy you were asking about, Jeff? Excuse me.
That I was asking about?
Yeah.
Oh, the last guy on your list, probably.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember who
he asked about him, but I just haven't done work on him.
It was the tackle.
I haven't really seen much of him, so it doesn't really matter. We're running out of time, Tim. So we really appreciate the show tonight, guys. There were so many great questions and comments.
He also had a 9.91 RAS, the other guy, too.
Who was that?
Jalen Travis is who it was.
Oh, that tackle. Okay, yeah.
Yes.
So, later round guys, we know that's what they're going to do. They love to draft guys with high RAS scores. Really,
especially late.
What they do.
Especially
in
late.
general, they draft guys with high RAS scores. So they love that athletic ability. We know that. So, anyways, guys, like I was saying a minute ago, the comments you guys all made tonight, the questions you had, the ability, the way we were able to drive this show tonight with what you guys were saying, it really helped. It really helped out tonight because you really. If you guys didn't make the points for me with the things you were saying, you really helped to kind of drive home the points that I wanted to make. So I really appreciate the fact that you guys did that tonight. It was excellent. So I really hope that you guys will continue to come back in the future, watch our show so we can do this with y'all and we can continue to talk about the Bears and the future of this team because it really is bright. And I really like to see what's going to happen here. I'm very curious about a lot of these draft prospects. We've got a month till the draft starts. So we got a lot of time to talk about this. And, I'd love to see what else you guys think in the next month or so. And obviously things are going to change between now and then, especially with like top 30 visits that are reported and other little free agents, signings that trickle in the last waves of free agency and stuff. So, we're going to be looking out for that. And then when the draft comes around, obviously that's going to be the most exciting time for us here. So again, thank you so much, guys. As always, a quick reminder before we get out of here to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. You can find us all at on X or Twitter. I am at _Jeff Willis. My partner here, Tim, is at Tim Willis 24. And our awesome executive producer, Aldo Gandia, is at Barroom Network. So again, guys, until next week, we appreciate you being here, and we'll see you then. Bear down.
Da Bears.
The Willis Twin Towers podcast is a Barroom Network production. Jeff and Tim Willis are the co-hosts and co-producers. Aldo Gandia is executive producer. Music is licensed from Pond 5. Any copyrighted material used was done under the Fair Use Doctrine for commentary, criticism, and informative purposes. All of our programming is available in audio-only format by subscribing to the Barroom Network wherever you download podcasts. Videos are archived on YouTube.